ASMR or welcome back. In tonight's video, I will catch you up on books I read in March. Think of these book catch-up videos as sort of chat with a friend, a visit where we're reminiscing about recalling the books we've read in the past month, and it's my turn to just relive the experience. You'll get your turn later, I'm sure. So this month of March was quite an interesting one for me, and I made some decisions based on my experience about how I would like to move forward. So, moving forward with my reading year, I would like to essentially every month read one literary novel, so one book that is very much recognized, whether as part of the canon or as a classic, a modern classic, or an award winner. So really serious fiction. I do enjoy reading books that are deeply philosophical, sometimes historical, and I would like to continue to do so. However, based on one of the books that I read this month, I would like to limit that because those existential crises that we often see when we're reading really serious literary novels can be a bit of a stumbling block. It often takes longer to read books like those if you're really trying to understand and fully experience what the story is, what the author wants you to kind of experience and discover. So I would love to read one literary novel and have only one existential crisis a month, and then for the other novels, and usually I'll cover 3, I would like to read contemporary fiction, read books that are perhaps fantasy. I might even delve into some sci-fi at times, but something that, while it can have that emotional impact and it can make me ask questions and think and grow as a person, it's not going to kind of bring me down. The books that you don't have to be a literary scholar to enjoy them. So you will probably notice this in my videos moving forward, and I will indicate in tonight's video the distinction, although usually it'll be very clear. I just thought I would preface with that, but without further ado, I'm going to launch into the first book that I finished in March. And note, I didn't say the first book I read, but the first book I finished. And I will get to that in a bit. So, we have the lovely gorgeous The Turnaway Girls by Hayley Chewin. And this is actually a debut novel. Beautiful, beautiful cover. I'm not going to lie, as much as I love secondhand books, I do from time to time love to find a gorgeous, beautiful little book, and so I was very taken by this cover. And I'll first read you the synopsis to give you a little bit of context. In Blight's End, everyone knows their place. Music belongs to the masters, and girls with singing throats are swallowed by the sea. Delphernia Undersea is the Turnaway Girl. She has spent her whole life in the cloister, hidden from sea and sky, expected to silently turn music into gold, making shimmer, Mother Nine calls it. But Delphernia can't make shimmer, and she would rather sing than stay silent. So, when she has the chance to leave the cloister, she takes it. But the outside world is not how Delphernia imagined, and she soon discovers it will take courage to truly change her fate. So, as we see on the cover, we have a quote by Kieran Millward Hargrave that this is a startlingly ambitious and lyrical debut. So it's a debut novel. It's actually by a South African author. So it's quite exciting to read a debut. I don't generally read books that have come out within, the last 20 years sometimes. So it's my first debut in a long time, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lovely break from the very, very serious fiction that I will talk about in a moment. The order is a bit wonky because I read this book, I started reading it second, but I finished it first. So I had to get a little bit of a break away from the second book that I finished, but the book I started with. You understand? So what I really enjoyed about this book that was indeed lyrical, very poetic, was that, as is usually the case with fantasy, we had a very strong sense of allegory. And what I noted very early on is that we've got girls, right? We've got young girls who are expected not to sing or to speak, right? They are expected to be silent, and so their music belongs to masters, right? It doesn't belong to themselves. And so I saw that very much as a metaphor of girls in the real world, or even women, who are expected to be quiet, be ladylike, and accept, right? To accept the status quo. And so this book really, from the outset, showed that, this is something that it can't really keep you trapped forever. Okay, so what I really loved was the character protagonist Delphinia. She is unsatisfied with her lot in life. They say she lives in a cloister. It's basically a cave, right? It's like a dome. And, you know, so they've got sort of cave walls. It's very obviously isolated. It's just her. Other girls that are expected to make shimmer but are not expected to, you know, own their voices. The shimmer, the gold is for other people, for masters, and they are trapped there. They live there, and essentially what happens is that when they turn 12, when they live their whole lives, when they're infants, when they are 12, though, masters, but you know, masters who are also 12 years old, they come into the cloister. They play their little stone flutes, I suppose flutes, and the girls will sing for them. You literally make gold out of their voices, and then the master will say, yes, you. And they will take these girls away to go and live in their homes, their palaces and whatever. So it's very important to be chosen and to have this opportunity to leave, because otherwise you will spend the rest of your life in the cloister. And so it's it's ironic because they have to use their voices to get out, but their voices are not their own. They are literally claimed by these masters. And so Delphinia, obviously we see she gets a chance to leave, and she does, but she finds that because of who she is, because of her dissatisfaction with essentially following the rules, just accepting the way that her life is, her role as a turn-away girl, she is not safe. You know, she is not going to be happy just because she's left the cloister. And so, without, you know, giving away spoilers and all of that, because I really do recommend this book. It's so, as I said, poetic. The way that Chewins describes the singing, the way in which the voice, the words, the song becomes gold it's quite enchanting, you know. So, you know, again, without giving away too much, because it's really quite near the beginning of the book, we see that dear Delphinia is not like the other girls, and she literally calls them other girls, but she's not like the girls that live with her in the cloister, because what she can achieve with her voice is something quite different, and it makes all the difference to her when she gets out. I will give a little warning though, because it's not excessive, it's not graphic, but there is emotional and some physical abuse suffered by Delphinia from her caretaker, the girl's caretaker, Mother Nine. And as I said, it's not extreme or anything, but it is unpleasant, and you know, we can be quite sensitive to these things, so I'd rather just note it's very short. It's near the beginning, and you know, it doesn't last very long. But I thought I'd mention that. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I do recommend it quite highly. It was quite a lovely little adventure. I honestly felt, you know, and we see this with a lot of fantasies, we see series, and I felt like, oh, this could have been a series. The story is very neatly wrapped up at the end, but I do think I'll look out for dear Hayley Sheerans to see maybe if she writes some series in the future. Okay, and then I have another book that I read on Kindle, and it is called Animals People by Indra Sindha, and this was quite the heart-wrenching and distressing read, and this was why I came up with my rule to read one literary novel per month. I will read a really wonderful synopsis that I have in this monster, 1001 books you must read before you die. This was a great gift that I got about 13 years ago, and was actually where I found the recommendation for Animals People. So let's see Animals People, Indra Sinha. Shortlisted for the prestigious Man Booker Prize in 2007, Animals People is Indra Sinha's second novel. The story is set in India, in the fictional town of Kafpur, or Fear Town, where 20 years earlier a chemical leak from an American-owned factory killed thousands, poisoned the water, and left many people permanently disabled. The similarity with the Bhopal disaster in 1984 is intentional. The author is at the forefront of the campaign for justice for the victims of Bhopal. From the opening line, "I used to be human once," the central character insists that he is not human, but is the one and only animal. Taunted with this name after the disaster left him with a spine so damaged that he is forced to walk on all fours, Animal has claimed the insult as the essence of himself, to express his otherness from those around him, his bitterness at his fate, and to excuse his amoral behavior. In spite of his refusal to accept his humanity, however, Animal is intelligent, articulate, funny, and caring, and is cared for by all around him, from the mad old French nun Ma Frankie to his rival in love, Safar. Using Animal's odd mixture of Hindi, French, and Indianized English words such as company, journalist, and jamsponding, spying like James Bond, the book creates a fabulously multi-dimensional evocation of the dark world of the hopelessly poor. Animals People. It is the story of those who have nothing, fighting those who have everything. The author interlaces masterly storytelling with thought-provoking questions, from what it means to be human to the nature of God. Though his invective against the evil Americans can seem jarringly black and white at times, this is perhaps appropriate in what is essentially a fable. So I literally could not have summed it up better myself. Lovely walkthrough of what is the backstory for the story, because it is based on a true disaster that happened. I researched it afterwards. I didn't want any spoilers in case that would happen, but I researched it after I finished the book, and as I said, just really distressing, very disturbing, and you know, it was a hard one to read because, as you can see, it was based on something that actually happened to people, suffering that people experience, and it was, yeah, it really hurt, you know. As they said, you know, you're asking yourself these existential type questions about, you know, the nature of God, what it means to be human. It was something that really pushed me to think about really deep life questions that aren't comfortable to think about. And it also, as you saw, I emphasized, it's about the hopelessly poor. I mean, the people, their lives, their health issues, their, you know, their poverty is devastating, and so it was quite a tough world to live in. And of course I felt very guilty because I'm only living there in my mind, and I'm already feeling horrible and sad and despondent and despairing, and I can only imagine what it would be to actually have that life, and for that to be a reality that you know, I can't just escape by switching off my Kindle. So yeah, it really, actually getting a little bit emotional because it was very tough to live alongside Animal, and as you can see, he's funny, you know, he has friends, he has those who care for him, love him, he loves others, but his life is very difficult, and he you know, he's a fascinating character. As I said, he's you know, amoral. He's not immoral, he's amoral, and he insists that he is an animal, he's not human, and it's part of his pain, you know, it's part of his difficulty with being so can I say disabled? I'm trying to think of the politically correct term, you know. And so it's very tough when you see how human he is, how much humanity, how much love he has, how much he cares about those around him, but he insists that he is not human, he's outside that, because he feels he can't fully participate in you know, normal human life, because of his physical situation, and all the consequences that come from that. So if you want to read something that's really going to challenge you, and it's really going to make you think about places in the world that you don't usually think about, and put things in perspective, right? What are your problems versus what other people's problems could be, and give you a newfound appreciation for your body, for your financial situation, for maybe the political situation in your country, because the government is really very much an untrustworthy, so I can say, I would say also one of the antagonists in the story. So if you want to maybe experience something that is very different from your life, to kind of give yourself some appreciation for what other people go through, and perhaps develop your empathy, then I would recommend this book. But you're going to need to be strong. I think that was part of why, as I said, I started the month reading this book, took a break to read The Turnaway Girls, and then came back to this book because I did need a break. I needed to kind of come up for air, because it's all enveloping. The language usage is brilliant. It's so creative. It's very different, and it really wraps you up, and you feel very present. So absolutely brilliant writing, and for that reason it gets you. It really deeply grabs you, and it kind of pulls you down for quite a while. But you know, there is some light at the end of the tunnel, and as I said, I did do some research. So you know, as difficult and as absolutely excruciating a situation as it was, there is some resolution in the novel and in real life. Whether that, no, I'm not even going to say whether financial compensation can never fully account for pain and suffering, but you know, sometimes that's all that there is on offer. So yeah. Right. So next we have Neil Gaiman, and it's his novel Stardust. Gorgeous little simple cover. I quite liked the image of the falling star and the deep purple, which I think a lot of us associate with the magic in these fantasy type stories. So Neil Gaiman probably doesn't need much of an introduction. This is the first book that I've written, that I've read. I listened to Caroline on audio, so even though it kind of counts, to me it never really feels the same. It kind of feels a bit like cheating. And I tried to read The Graveyard Book, but I didn't quite finish that one. So this was my first reading of Neil Gaiman, although it was my introduction to him. He's also written novels Neverwhere, American Gods, Anansi Boys, series of graphic novels, story collections. You know, he's very, very famous and very, very successful as a fantasy writer. So, right, you might also be familiar with the story Stardust, because of course there is a movie adaptation, and unlike what I usually like to do, which is to read the book first and then watch the movie adaptation, I watched Stardust before I knew that there was a book. So it was interesting for me to do it the other way around. And although I watched the movie about 2 years ago, I found it must have been quite a good adaptation, because a lot of what was happening in the book came across as quite familiar. It made a lot of sense, and I thought, I remember that, and I remember that, and that was done quite well, you know. So just overall, I of the book. Obviously, you know, he's a very, very famous, very, very popular writer, and you know, that doesn't always click with me. I don't always connect with very popular writers, but I will say that he taps into a side of fantasy that I could say I enjoy. I think I will read our synopsis and then launch into my experience of reading the book. So, young Tristan Thorn will do anything to win the cold heart of beautiful Victoria, even fetch her the star they watched fall from the night sky. But to do so, he must enter the unexplored lands on the other side of the ancient wall that gives their tiny village its name. Beyond that old stone wall, Tristan learns, lies a fairy where nothing, not even a falling star, is what he imagined. From #1 New York Times best-selling author Neil Gaiman comes a remarkable quest into the dark and miraculous, in pursuit of love and the utterly impossible. So I mispronounced his name. He's Tristram, not Tristan. Tristram. So Tristram is young, he's in love, although it's really, I wouldn't quite say lust, but it's a very naive type of love in that he doesn't really know Victoria. They haven't really connected. They're not in love with each other, you know. It's very one-sided, unfortunately. And he is very idealistic, you know. She's beautiful, but it's, you know, not much further than that. So I wouldn't say Tristram's shallow necessarily, but I would say that I would use the word naive, because I think some young people, and especially in previous generations, they would think, oh, someone's beautiful, that must mean they're good and sweet and kind and caring, and it's like, it's not like that. Not that it can't happen, but you know, he says he loves her, and you know, he's going to do whatever she wants so that he can have her hand in marriage, you know, his heart's desire. And so she asks for this fallen star, which it's hard not to give spoilers, but it's also like, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the movie, you're aware of it, so I don't want to spoil it, but there wouldn't be much to say if I didn't mention that the falling star takes the form, once she lands in fairy, the magical realm, she takes the form of a human, a woman. And so Tristram, through magical means, he finds his way to her, and he wants to take her back to Victoria. But of course, being in human form, she has her own character, she has her own personality. She is not really truly human. She doesn't eat, she doesn't drink, she glows, you know, but she does feel like a person and speak like a person, and so Tristram has to deal with the fact that she is not happy with having fallen from the sky. She's not happy to be taken as this thing to be given to someone else, understandably. So the majority of the story is the two of them journeying back to Wall, which is in the human world, so that Tristan can present her to his love, Victoria, you know, the deepest desire of his heart. I don't remember how they phrase it. But yeah, there are a few other major characters. There is essentially a hunt for this star, and this is where these other major characters come in, because they also want her, but for their own reasons. So there are the princes of Stormhold, so that would be the principality or the royalty, and their father has basically said, whoever gains my topaz, he's got this necklace, whoever gets my topaz can be the next Lord of Stormhold, and it kind of throws it into the sky. And I guess he's got super magical like strength, because it actually collides with the star as it's falling. And so these lords, they want to find this topaz, and unbeknownst to them but known to us, our star Yvain, she actually has it, and so they're unwittingly hunting her, and so we see these brothers, and they're all very murderous, and so it's very, you know, clear that they will stop at nothing. And so of course our dear Yvain is in mortal peril at certain points in the story. And then one of the best characters in the movie, I think they definitely sort of amped up her role in the story, although she is very important. I think in the book they just probably spent a bit more screen time than if I had read the book first. I would have maybe been surprised with how much screen time they gave the character in the movie, but at the same time not too surprising, because in the movie the character was played by Michelle Pfeiffer, who was just stunningly amazing. You know, she's beautiful, but I don't want to give too much away, but you know, she's actually really ancient, and so let's just say she goes through a lot of makeup changes. I really don't want to spoil, because it's a gorgeous book, it's a gorgeous movie, so I don't want to give away parts of the story that I really enjoyed and that give a lot of excitement and joy to those who experience it. So you know, this character, I'm trying to think, she is one of 3 witches, and they are called the Ilum. I don't think they have individual names from what I remember, but suffice it to say, she's not one of those witches of you know, 21st century that is you know, on the side of good, you know, like a Hermione or a Molly Weasley. You know, she is not like these friendly witches in little kids' books that, you know, they're learning how to do their magic. No, she's just a pure evil type of witch. So she's very interesting to follow, and her interactions with another woman, that other woman's name, she is named in the story. Oh, I can only think of the nickname given to her. She calls her Ditchwater Sal, I think. But at any rate, you know, her, meaning the Ellen, the Witch Queen, she's also referred to. She deals with this woman Sal, and that's also an interesting and important character, the role that she plays in the overarching story. She has a slave that she has transformed into a bird. It's a woman who used to, you know, do her chores and sell her wares and that sort of thing, but now, you know, she just lives as a bird because she gave away some merchandise as a gift. So I hope it doesn't seem like I'm mixing up the characters. So that is the woman that has been enslaved by Ditchwater Sow, and then the witch queen, the Elam, is a different person. Sometimes I just get excited and then everything I'm saying kind of jumbles into one. But yeah, absolutely recommend. Lovely, lovely little book. It is written in a style that comes across as quite appropriate for, let's say, from 10 to 15, but there is definitely subject matter that is more adult in nature. So it was interesting stylistic choice because it comes across almost like a kid's book, but it's not. But it definitely is enjoyable, wonderful, and I recommend. Stardust by Neil Gaiman. Then my very last book for the month is The Summer We Read Gatsby by Danielle Ganick. And I forgot to mention that Stardust is a library book, and so is this book that is the last book I read in March. Right, so I will read the synopsis. A tale of two half-sisters, a summer of cocktails and cupcakes, theme parties and chiffon dresses, with a Jackson Pollock painting and a twinklingly handsome bachelor architect thrown in for good measure. So, as you can see, like with Stardust, The Summer We Read Gatsby is a lot more on the lighter side of the novel world. You know, Turnaway Girls was a fantasy, so, you know, they're usually a bit more, there's a bit more levity in them, but it was quite a serious book, you know, whereas Stardust and The Summer We Read Gatsby are really quite delightful and just a really breath of fresh air. Stardust, of course, is fantasy, and here we have some just regular old contemporary fiction, and I was absolutely captured by the title, The Summer We Read Gatsby, because of course, as you might know, I studied literature for many years, and you know, reading The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald is something that literary scholars, they just do. So I've read it, I've reread it, I've even tutored students on The Great Gatsby, so I'm a big fan of the novel. The first time I read it, I thought, oh, okay, this is a great American novel, which I have been guilty of before, but when I studied it, I really started to see, okay, I can kind of see what's going on here. But it's when I started rereading it, and it's when I started tutoring, that I really came to see how great it actually is. You know, it's very good. So I thought a book about people who read Gatsby and about the time around which they read Gatsby was going to be quite interesting, if not totally intellectual, because I could read from the blurb on the back that it was very much, a summer read. It's literally, it was in an article, Sam's hottest beach reads, that they plucked that quote. And it says, for the beach bag, apply sunscreen before you lose yourself, which is kind of cheesy. And on the front, people said it is a smart, entertaining romp. So even though, the title was indicating some, readerly type of story, it also was quite clearly indicated that the book is fun. So I thought, what a great combination. And it was. I really did enjoy this book. For the first time in a long time, I laughed out loud several times while reading a book. So I enjoyed the humor. The story is narrated from the perspective of Stella Blue, or Cassie, depending on who you are. You might call her one or the other. And she's got quite an interesting way of viewing people around her, especially her half-sister, who is Pexland, or Peck for short. And so the we is, it's kind of loose because it's in reference to Peck, who again, as I said, is her half-sister, but it also loosely captures their Aunt Lydia, because she's the one that gets them to read, and this takes place in a summer holiday. So the summer that they read Gatsby is actually from their youth, when they were, I think it was 7 years prior to it was 7 years prior to the events of the novel. And so from that we already see it's quite it's a novel where there's a lot of reminiscing, there's looking back to the past, and unfortunately, I mean, I'll have to give it away because the whole book is based around this event occurring, but it does happen quite early, so it's not really a spoiler. But the Aunt Lydia has actually passed on, and these two half sisters, who are daughters of Aunt Lydia's brother, though they have different mothers, she's left her holiday home, her beach home, to them, and they have to settle the affairs, right? They have to sort out everything in the home, and she has exhorted them to do that and then sell the home, but only after spending a month of summer together. So it's just so readable, it really was quite an easy book to get all the way through. The characters are very fun and engaging. Even Stella Blue, who is kind of a stick in the mud by her own admission, she's much more serious. She was raised in Europe, so compared to Peck, who is very American, very much a New Yorker, she is a bit more reserved. And so that's why it's quite funny the way she narrates and talks about the other characters. They come alive through her descriptions, and she actually wants to be an author. So she does have that knack for words, and so the relationship between, I can't think of her name, Stella and her half-sister Peck is the center of the story, and it's really quite interesting to see how they interact with each other. Certainly how Pick influences Stella through the holiday. It's quite sweet because they did not grow up together. As I said, they have the same father, but they have two different mothers, and Stella was raised in Europe and Peg was raised in the States, in New York. And so the only time they really had growing up together was the summers they spent with their Aunt Lydia at the beach house. And, you know, these were summers where their aunt, who was an English teacher, would make them read. And so that's how we get the summer we read Gatsby. There's the summer they read, I'd love to find that very quickly. You know, the different summers. The summer we read Nancy Drew. The summer we read The Catcher in the Rye. The summer we read Edith Wharton. And the summer we read Catch 22. So these were the times that they spent together when they were young. But as I said, it's been 7 years since the last one, since they read Gatsby. And they're coming together at a point where they are in not quite in the full throes of grief and mourning. It's been a little bit of time. They've already attended, you know, the funeral, but you know, it's still relatively fresh that their dear aunt, who truly loved them and was really the only one in their family that made any effort to bring these sisters together, she's passed on. And so, you know, it has a lot of heart to it. You know, on the surface, you know, they've got parties and they've got the handsome architect, and Peck has her girls, her friends, and there's quite a bit of socializing and that sort of thing, but it's really quite a loving story underneath that kind of runs through, and we see the development of the relationship from, you know, half sisters that don't really know each other, very different, trying to connect, not really getting each other, to, you know, grown women at the start of the story who have to work together and have to understand each other in order to settle the affairs of the home. So if you are in the mood for something just fun and light with some heart to it, you know, some sisterly love, and it's really quite sweet, then I would recommend The Summer We Read Gatsby by Danielle Ganek. So that was my March. It was a little bit of a mix there, and I like it that way. I would love to continue through the rest of the year with that kind of mix. I find that if I read too many serious books, one after the other, it feels like a real drag, and I don't enjoy being steeped in feelings of despair and just these empathy attacks that you know, take the heart out of you, really. So yeah, I'd be interested to know in the comments, what are your reading habits? How do you choose what you will read next? As you could probably tell, my The Turnaway Girls is a brand new copy. Very unusual for me to go out and buy a new book, but due to all the books that I own being these literary novels, I knew I had to go out and find something that was a bit lighter, and So yes, you can see I had a brand new book. I read on my Kindle a book that I bought about 6 years ago, and then 2 library books. So yeah, what kind of books do you read? Are they always your own? Are they always brand new? Do you go to secondhand bookshops? Do you visit the library? And in terms of genre, in terms of levels of seriousness, I'd love to know, what are your reading habits? What do you love? What do you do, you know? And I'd love to thank you so much if you made it this far. I super appreciate your interest and your support.